Let's talk to Danzil Monk in New York. Danzil has a question. How do we gauge atheist sincerity and honesty in the claims that they make? Danzil. Now, it says here, I have a note, Danzil, that Derek actually asked you to call in. Is that right?
Yes, he did.
Great. Do you have another moniker that you go by?
Well, no.
You're
That's my name.
preacher teacher, right?
There you go. Oh, that's
Okay.
yes, and that's what I go by when I'm on certain some internet. Yes.
Okay. And where was this? So I understand that Danzil, you and Derek have been having some conversations elsewhere. Where was that? Is that like on the YouTube channel?
No, it was on
it's a conservative Christian blog.
On a blog. Okay. Maybe we can plug that later so that people can go see if it becomes relevant. But hey, so what's your question for us, Danzil? Do you want to reiterate?
Sure. Well, conversations with Derek. I think he's a nice guy. I think he's a very intelligent guy, and I also think that he seems to be very genuine in his efforts to try to get at the truth. But when we're talking, and not just with him, but with most atheists that I talk with, I find that they make claims of wanting to be very, very solid on truth. They want to get to the truth, and they want to expose the lies of false religion and things of that nature, which I think is commendable. But when we start dialoguing, there seems to be a bait and switch type thing going on where they begin to, I don't know, I'm trying to figure out how do we gauge the honesty and integrity of an atheist when they give their arguments, they oftentimes, against us, they often leave things out that they shouldn't leave out, or they deny things that they shouldn't be denying. And there's a lot of, I call it, tactics that they use to protect themselves from being refuted. And that bothers me when I'm talking with atheists. And so I'm trying to say, how do we gauge their integrity? How do we gauge an atheist's integrity when we're in dialogue with them? I know you have ways of gauging our integrity. And so I think that we should both.
How's that? Like, my first question is what the difference is in gauging an atheist integrity versus are you a Christian?
Yes.
Yeah. So what's the difference between gauging an atheist sincerity and a Christian sincerity?
That's a problem with anything. You'd never know.
I'm sorry?
That's a problem with any conversation. Yeah, there's a delay.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
So there's going to automatically be an inability to know exactly what the other person is thinking, of course. So you just have to work with what you've got to give them the benefit of the doubt. And if they say something that's doesn't work, then bring it up and try and figure it out from their answers. I mean,
but
I think
it sounds. Yeah. Go ahead, Danzil.
I think you misunderstood my question. I'm saying that when we're in dialogue with each other, we're making arguments, we're responding to arguments, we're trying to gauge, we're trying to get at what the facts are, what the truth is, what the best truth is. And in that conversation, if we're talking about the alphabet and I say A B C, those are the first 3 letters of the alphabet, and you say, well, no, they're not. The first 3 letters of the alphabet is Z, Y, and W. And I'm like, well, now I know I'm telling you the truth. How do you gauge? Isn't the evidence itself the way to determine whether somebody is honest and sincere or correct?
Sure. I mean, so it sounds like you have a problem. You reach an impasse with people who you don't, who disagree with you on some fundamental points that you are not open to having challenged, for example. Right? Like, so in your example, well, let me hear me out. So if you said to me, the first 3 letters of the alphabet are A, B, C, and I said, well, no, they're not. You might say, oh, you're being insincere. And I might be saying, well, you didn't specify what language we're talking about or what alphabet we're using, right? We could be using the Greek alphabet. We could be using the Arabic alphabet. We could be using the Chinese alphabet or the Japanese. Like, there's other possible explanations. But you have already,
Agreed.
Danzil, narrowed your mind in to think, no, I'm right. It's A, B, C. How could anyone not understand such an obvious thing? You must be being dishonest if you disagree that A, B, and C are the first 3 letters of the alphabet. That's how this is coming across to me.
Your example is correct. You're absolutely. I didn't go into detail about what I meant by ABC. I was just giving it as a brief example. You went more
Right,
deep
but this is my point: is that maybe the reason that you're having trouble engaging or having trouble believing or getting into these conversations is because you're not trying to actually understand what your the person you're talking to is saying, right? Like, you have to be a little bit open-minded in what you're proposing, right? You have to be willing to admit or willing to be convinced that whatever you say, you have to be willing to be proven wrong about that or shown to be wrong, and be willing to admit that you're wrong, right?
I agree with you.
And there's an easy way to do that too. Simply ask questions. If somebody says it's not ABC for the first letters of the alphabet, ask them, okay, what are they, and why do you say it's XYZ instead?
Right.
What is your reasoning behind that? And usually the person will be able to give you an answer. And if they give you something that's testable, then you can make a test on that. For example, yeah. Okay.
So Danzil, it sounds like this came from a more real world situation. So what was the like? Is there a more? All right, give us that specific example then.
Yeah, give an example.
The reason why I did, I was trying to save time. I didn't want to monopolize your time, but I think if you give me this opportunity to say, let me give you a good example, just one example.
Yeah, go for it.
Atheists believe that evolution explains how life came about. Christians believe that atheists do not believe that.
Hang on, Derek. Let's just let Danzil. We'll just let Danzil finish, and then we'll go.
My apologies.
Go ahead, Danzil.
So, the atheists believe that there's another source or cause for life other than a divine intelligence. Christians, of course, believe that there's a divine intelligence. Atheists, from my knowledge, what I've understood so far from my conversation with them, is that they believe that evolution is the best answer to explain that source. Christians, of course, believe that there's a divine being that provides it. All we have the same evidence that we look at to kind of determine this information, which is what we see in life. There's a law in the books called the law of Abiogenesis. I'm sure you all know what that is. The law of Abiogenesis says that non-life cannot beget life, which is, I think that's a standard. When we bring that law to an atheist, they say, well, no, we believe in abiogenesis. They come up with abiogenesis, which means they could come up with their hypothesis about how these chemicals or something might have started life on its own. They don't have any facts, but they say that that's the way it might have happened. So they completely ignore abiogenesis, and they say that abiogenesis has nothing to do with evolution. So they say that very first point, and they jump to the chemical development. So that's my point.
All right, okay. I think we got it, Danzil. Let's respond. Okay. So, Derek, why don't you go first?
All right.
Yeah, if I may. Okay. First thing, atheists have one statement to make, just one, and that is a lack of belief in God. That's it. That does not mean that they believe in the evolutionary processes. It just means that they don't believe in God. That's it. So that in fact, some of the people who have contributed the most to evolutionary theory, or at least have been big proponents of it, are highly religious. Francis Collins, for example. Mm-hmm. He's an evangelical, I believe. There's also Robert Bacher, who was a paleontologist. First, Francis Collins was the head of the Human Genome Project and the current head of the what's the
NIH.
national NIH? Thank you.
Yeah, NIH.
NIH. Robert Bacher is a paleontologist who's produced a huge number of, discovered a huge number of fossils and provided a lot of evolution education. And he's not only a Christian, he's a Pentecostal, but he's a Pentecostal preacher on top of that. So evolution and religious belief are not mutually exclusive.
Right. But granted,
Christianity.
I think to Danzil, they are frequently correlated, right?
Frequently, yes.
Yeah.
I would say most atheists accept evolutionary theory.
Right.
And what was the second thing? Biogenesis. Well, biogenesis only applies to life once it is already formed. So you can't say that the first life was subject to the law of biogenesis.
Right.
And let's see, abiogenesis and evolution are two different things. The first formation of life, even if we were to say that, to discover that, yes, God created the very first life, that still would have absolutely no impact on evolution itself, because evolution is about what happened to life after it formed. It's about the diversity of species, how we ended up with the wide variety of life that we have today.
Right.
That abiogenesis could occur naturally through natural chemical and
eventually biochemical.
Eventually biochemical. Yeah, this was getting to the eventually get into biochemical reactions. Or it could be created by gods. It could be created by aliens. It could be created by magical pixies. You
were talking about
on evolution itself.
Yeah, you were talking about Francis Collins, and the story of the Human Genome Project is interesting. His rival was Craig Ventnor, right?
Mm-hmm.
Who used a different approach to sequence the human genome, but he also is attributed to, him and his team obviously have created the first artificial life form, right? Like they built a cell from scratch sort of thing. Not exactly from scratch, but they built
the genome from scratch.
Yeah, the genome from scratch. Yes, they synthesized the whole genome. They put it into the cellular architecture and all that stuff that was already existing. But
they took a dead cell, removed the nucleus, and replaced the genome. So you actually do have a new life form, essentially.
Yeah.
Just more like Frankenstein. Yeah.
But I think that I get where you're coming from, Danzil. It seems frustrating because I think that so first of all, to build on what Derek was saying, like evolution, remember the first mention of evolution was Darwin, and Darwin's book was called The Origin of Species, right? Not the origin of life, the origin of species. So it's inherently talking about how did we get these different forms of life. So that's where evolution comes in. And then someone clever like yourself would come along and said, okay, so you're saying that all these different species came from species before. And then they followed that regress and they said, well, they can't all have come from, life before. Obviously, the law, I don't think it's a law. But anyways,
really.
This theory of biogenesis, where all life must come from other life, like that's an obviously fallacious argument, right? Like you can't have all life always coming from life all the way back. It's plainly fictitious. So, obviously, scientists had to find a solution to it, and logically, there had to be some point in time where life arose in some fashion from non-life. And again, like Derek was saying, what the exact etiology, what the exact cause of that life to be is, I think, what we're debating. But it's not moving the goalposts, even though it seems like it. It's just because your answer to this question answers both of those things, and people who believe in evolution and abiogenesis have subdivided it into two different categories. And I would say there are probably some people who believe in evolution but don't believe in abiogenesis, and they might say, well, yeah, sure, evolution did it, but God started it all.
That would be theist,
right?
Theistic evolutionists. Also, I guess old Earth creationists as well could be put in that category.
Does that make sense, Danzil?
Right. Yes, it does. I want to say thank you for you guys giving me your time and allowing me my opportunity to ask my question. I want to return the favor and invite you guys to one of my programs so we can talk about this topic. I think first of all that having communication is very important. Having very honest communication, very respectful communication is the only way we're going to resolve a lot of this confusion, these disagreements. So I appreciate you guys. I hope you guys can take me up on that. Derek knows how to contact me. I would love to have maybe an hour discussion with him, a dialogue with him on his views about evolution and his disagreements with our perspectives.
Right. We've had some, as MD Aware likes to call, spicy conversations on the blog, and that is kind of par for the course, in that when you're talking via text, there's a distance that automatically allows for more acrimonious conversations. So actual speaking with non-rancorous exchange of information actually is generally a better way to do it.
And I mean, I think ultimately, if you're showing up to
be able to speak better than type,
and I think ultimately, if you're having a conversation with someone, if you've already made the decision that you're going to talk to someone about whatever topic, you have to approach that with a sort of like principle of charity, right? Yeah, and you have to say like, okay, I'm going to assume that this person is going to come to this conversation and they're going to generally be honest about what they believe, and they're generally going to like not lie and not like purposely say things to throw me off, all this sort of thing, right? I mean, it's not always the case, but it's a good attitude to have, I think.
I agree. I look forward to talking with you, Derek.
Sounds good.
All right.
It might take a little while because if you haven't already figured out, I am busy. So I'm only able to hop on periodically. So but I promise I'll respond before too long.
Great stuff. Thanks again for your call, Danzil.